Today, we're going to talk about the analysis of our next opposition. We will take as a base what we have seen before in the previous sessions, but this kind of analysis is going to require a very specific methodology. So the first thing that we have to take into account is that we are focused on one specific team. In the third session of the course, we saw how to analyze a game in which we are paying attention to two teams. Now we are going to pay attention to two teams, as we will see later, but obviously we're going to be focused on the consequences and the outcomes, the conclusions that we get from specifically one of the teams, our next opposition. And we are not doing this analysis because we are aiming just to learn a bit from a football game. We are doing it because we have a game, we want to win it, and we want to prepare this game the best way possible. For this reason, and for me, this is the most important conclusion in this session of the course. The only thing which is really important and relevant is if we are successful identifying the main patterns and the key behaviors of the opposition, which are going to help our team to win the game. That is the only thing, the only outcome which is going to be relevant. And I say this because we can spend a lot of time in our analysis. Our final analysis can be this big, but if we are not able to identify the key points, it is not going to be successful. And I have met some coaches, very experienced coaches, which were able to identify those patterns and those key factors just watching one game and 15 minutes, half an hour, and they were able to see the key points of that opposition team. Well, lucky them. For the rest of us, we need to spend more time. But again, the outcome, if we are able to finally get those important points, that is the only thing which is relevant. For each opposition that we need to analyze, we will have limited time to do it. The deadlines will be there. So according also to the resources in terms of people involved in this analysis that we have, we will need to prioritize what we're going to give more importance to. And according to what we said, that the outcome of our analysis is the most important thing, if we have to decide, it will be better to allocate that time and resources to find out the key patterns of the opposition, rather than using that time and resources to put down our conclusions in a very showy manner. And I am talking about a very showy presentation or many clips in which we're going to spend most of our time. Because if we haven't identified the most important patterns from the opposition, we're going to be talking not about things which are not right, because they will be right, but they won't be the key factors that are going to help us to perform the best way possible in the next game. So depending on these deadlines and also the resources that we have for one specific opposition, we will need to be very selective. And one of the things that we need to prioritize very well and make the decision is how many games are we going to analyze in order to get the conclusions about that specific opposition. Some professional analysis departments work with 5, 7, 10 games of the opposition. Obviously, they are more than one people, and that is going to imply that they can multiply their analysis of a game. Depending on how many you are, depending on the deadline, you will need to make your decision. Now, if we need to choose a few games amongst a number of them, what criteria are we going to use to select those games? It is important that we make the right decision at this time, because it's going to save a lot of time and it's going to optimize the time that we spend onwards. We need to use common sense in order to identify those games which have had a similar context to the game that we are expecting against this team. The first thing, very important, they need to have the same coach. So if 3 games ago, the coach that they had is no longer there and they have a new one, those 3 games are the only ones that we are going to take into account, at least from a collective perspective. The same with the players, if some have joined the squad recently or some of them have left the team. Or in one game that we are analyzing, let's say, for example, that the 2 center defenders of the team were injured or suspended, and therefore we're watching a very unusual defensive line. maybe it is not worth to use this game to make conclusions about their defensive behaviors and performance. And in order to find a similar game, we need to take into consideration the opposition of our next opposition. So if it is a team which is similar to us, that's going to be even better because the analysis of the game is going to be much more useful for our purpose. As an example, let's say that the team we are analyzing plays long in a very efficient manner when they are pressed very high by their opposition. In one of the games that we are analyzing, we see how this is a key pattern. They get pressed in their own half and they play long in a very efficient manner, winning the 50-50 balls and causing much trouble against a disorganized opposition. Well, let us say now that our team do never press high, and obviously we know it. We always sit in a medium block and we let the opposition take the lead. In this case, those long balls are not going to apply to us, and we will need to find a relevant game in which our next opposition had to face a similar situation. Because in this case, the key question that we need to answer through our analysis is, how do this team manage those situations in which they are given the possession of the ball and they need to face a very organized defensive block with no spaces in behind that defensive block? If we are playing home or we are playing away against this specific team, we will try to find a similar game. And also the tactical expectation that we are expecting from this team, because sometimes we have more information out of the games that we are analyzing, maybe the press conference from the team or the tendency, whatever it is, and we are expecting a very specific tactical behavior from this team. So if the games that we have at disposal, in those games they are not using the same approach, not all of them are going to be useful. And finally, any other factors such as the dimensions or the conditions of the field, anything which is going to be similar to the game that we are expecting, that is going to be beneficial in order to select the games that we are going to analyze. My advice is that it is going to be much better to spend certain time in just one or two games rather than the same amount of time in more games when they are not going to be so relevant. The footage of the games will be a key tool for any analyst, but if we have the chance, watching at least one game live will allow us to perceive some key aspects of that team that might remain hidden if we only use the video. An important nuance in the analysis of our next opposition, and for me this is a key aspect of this part of the course as well, is that we are not watching the game or the games in order to try to explain what is happening on them. What we are doing is getting a lot of information, and our final outcome needs to be the prediction of that next opposition, what we expect they're going to do in the game against our own team. That is something that we always need to bear in mind, because if not, we're going to be focused on general aspects, what is happening in this game, in that one. We just need a final conclusion about that next opponent. And that final projection of the opposition, that final report, there are several ways to present it, to give it to the head coach. And it is the head coach who needs to decide and make clear what kind of report he wants from the analyst. So in the first one, the analyst is just going to tag the games. He's going to give that raw material to the head coach, and it is going to be the head coach who is going to make conclusions from what he sees. The analyst is going to prepare that material for the coach in order to simplify his further analysis of the games. Moving one step forward, a neutral description of the team, highlighting the threats and the opportunities so that the head coach has an overview of the team and can decide by his own what to expect against us and what the priorities are. This is the most common one, but as analysts, we need to be ready for the next level. The third one, and in this one, the analyst is going to put much more analysis on the process. The analyst is going to give the head coach his prediction of what is going to happen in the next game. So what the strategic plan of the opposition, in his opinion, is going to be. In this one, the analyst is going to add his proposal of the strategic plan for the own team. So this is what the opposition, I expect them to do. And this is what I, as an analyst, suggest that we can do as a team in order to play the best way possible against them. Normally, this is going to depend on the relationship and how much the head coach relies on the analyst. The more time they have been together, the more he knows that the analyst understand his ideas and they are in the same page, the more he's going to require from the analyst to give this further information and to propose this strategic plan for the own team. The final one is going to include, apart from the strategic plan for the own team, a proposal of training exercises for the week. So this is what I propose we need to do in the next game, and we're going to train it this way with this kind of exercises. Obviously, the analyst needs to know perfectly what the dynamics of the head coach are, and he needs to be in a position to present these training sessions in a good manner. In this kind of relationship, normally the analyst is going to be also some sort of assistant for the head coach and is going to be a part of the coaching staff on the field. Let's see now a very simple example that we can guess from a Champions League match. It is the first tire of the draw between Real Madrid and Manchester City in February 2020, 2-1 for Guardiola's team. We won't use the images and we'll just describe the facts in a game that you might remember. In that match, we could see how Manchester City changed some of their normal behaviors in order to be more competitive against the strengths and the weaknesses of their opponent. For example, they played long from their goal kicks during the first half. And with this in mind, we can play to imagine what the hypothetical process from the Manchester City analyst department might have been. So we will play to see how the stages could look like according to that example. In the first stage, they would just prepare that raw material for the coach. They would tag the game. In the second one, they would include a description of the next opposition. Real Madrid feel more comfortable defending forwards in the opposition's half rather than closer to their own goal. If the head coach wanted his analysts to go further, they would add their description of the opposition's strategic plan. Following the example, Real Madrid know that Manchester City take risks during the building up scenario. Therefore, they predict that Real Madrid will apply a very aggressive pressing. The head coach might ask them to suggest a solution or a tactical plan for the own team. In the example, we play to say that the analysts suggest that Manchester City should avoid risks during this first tire and that in goal kicks, they must use long direct passes from the goalkeeper to the strikers. And finally, they would add a suggestion of training plan if they were involved in the planning of the sessions and also in the training dynamics on the field. And regarding the way we're going to put this down, depending on the resources that we have, it can be in a written manner. If the head coach feels more comfortable working with this kind of report, it can be through video, and this is going to work very well for the players as well, obviously, or it can be a mixture depending on the resources that we have. To do the analysis, and as we saw in the first part of the course, it would be very interesting if we have the scenarios of the game tagged and in a sequence so that we can analyze the different scenarios of the game in order to identify the main patterns. So for example, if we have all the building up scenarios in a row, we can identify very easily what the different behaviors of the team are. But as we said, we can miss a bit the flow of the game. So in an isolated manner, it's going to be fine, but we cannot analyze an opponent, a team, just based on these sequenced clips. Our analysis will always be collective and individual. I would like to propose, don't do it separately. Don't do the individual analysis and the collective analysis. Try to mix it up. Try to connect both things, because the players need to understand how the individual performance is going to have an implication in the collective approach. And I say this because many times we do a very individual analysis that we give to each of the players in order to help them to understand in a better manner the opposition, the direct opponent that they're going to have in front of them. So, for example, the right fullback, how is the left winger of the opposition playing normally? And what I would do, as I said, is trying to connect the collective approach and the collective conclusions that we have about the opposition with this individual performance. Let's see now what steps we can take to get to know the team we are analyzing, with the final goal to predict what their tactical behavior will look like against us. Firstly, we must carry out a general analysis in order to get to understand the structure of this team and also their main intentions and the main capacities of this team to solve the different scenarios of the game. That means in the different scenarios of the game, which once more will be key for us, what do they try to do and what is their real capacity to solve those football challenges, those scenarios. This will provide us with a general tactical overview of the team. But we need more, since we said that we are aiming to understand what can help our team to win the game. So, according to what the opposition of that opposition is trying to do on the field, what worked against them, so what was able to beat that team that we are analyzing, what was able to create problems and what situations they weren't able to solve, because that is going to give us some clues about what we can do against them, and the opposite. So what strengths they showed and against what kind of teams and what kind of tactical approaches they were more successful. Once we have this and we have a general picture of this opposition, we need to analyze different phases of the game, because there are some teams which are better in the initial part of the game, and as the game is progressing, they get diluted or they find some problems, or the opposite, they finish better than they start, or they show an evolution or a specific reaction after a turning point in the game. So it is not just getting a big picture of the team, and this is in general what they do. We need to follow up how they evolve during the game, and if the coach is also able to change things with their substitutions, or when he's changing something in a tactical manner on the field. There can be a plan A, plan B, they can maybe adapt to different scenarios depending on what they find in front of them. And all this information, we need to reflect it on our analysis. And we're going to do this through the conclusions. The conclusions always, as we said, according to what the head coach is asking us to do. But in a general manner, I would say that this is a good way to present it. So the first thing, what players are we expecting to play against us? A prediction of the starting 11. It is difficult to do, but sometimes we can have an idea and we can give the information to the head coach of what players we expect to play against us. If we can add some general information about the players, that would be fine. For me, this wouldn't be a priority. So it would be if, again, in our analysis of our resources, we identify that we can spend some resources on this. For example, if the players are right or left footer, the age of the players, some general details about their background, all that, if we can provide the head coach with that, that is going to be wonderful. But we don't have to waste time on that if we don't have those resources. And secondly, the most important thing, the expected strategic plan from the opposition, what we expect them to do. And in this one, we're going to get all the information that we mentioned before in the previous analysis, and we're going to try to give it as simple as possible to the head coach so that the final report is not massive, is not a lot of information, and we are able to provide it in an organized manner and prioritizing those strategic points which we think are going to be key in the game that we're going to play against them. Going back to the example of the game between Real Madrid and Manchester City, let us play a game to be a part of the Manchester City team of analysts. Following our methodology, we can imagine how, after reviewing a number of games from Real Madrid, we would have identified as a main pattern that they managed two different approaches for the BPO2 scenario. They either press high in a very aggressive manner, or they allow the opposition to build up and they wait a bit deeper in a medium or low block in their own field. This could be a general understanding of this team. And moving forward, we would have seen that in recent games, when they sit back, they find more trouble to be efficient in their defensive performance, whereas they are more successful pressing in the opposition's half. Also, during the games, when they are in trouble, if they hesitate, they leave gaps if they try to press high. They are very efficient in their high pressing if they do it successfully from the beginning, but they struggle if they are not confident enough. Matching this with our own team, Manchester City, we can guess that they will try to apply a high pressing in our goal kicks, since we normally play short and take risks. This behavior from us is very convenient for them. In conclusion, there is a strategic decision to be made from our side, taking into consideration our analysis of the opposition's behavior in this scenario of the game. We are mainly focusing on examples regarding the strategic plans in order to make strategic decisions. Let's see now a different sort of example showing the deeper level of detail that we must provide in our analysis. Because it's not only a matter of predicting that the main scenario of the next game will be a sustained threat from the opposition side. We need to provide details about the behaviors of that team in that scenario, how they carry out such sustained threat in detail, how they use the spaces, the kind of superiorities they try to create, strengths and weaknesses. As we said, we are aiming to get an understanding of what can mainly be of help for our own team to beat this specific opposition. This is why we always need to bear in mind our own team and translate what we are seeing in these games to what we reckon might happen against us, how they will react against our normal tactical strategies, and how we might be able to deal with those situations. After having followed this methodology and with those conclusions in our hands, let's see a suggestion of a structure for the final report. As we said, we will need to do the final report according to the stage of detail and analysis the head coach is requiring. Just a description, a prediction, a suggestion of our plan. Therefore, the following suggested structure of final report can be adjusted to any of those stages. This suggested structure for the final report would include the following information: a description of the bases in which this report sits. This basically means the games we have analyzed so that the reader can understand where our conclusions come from. A very rough description of the full squad of players, just names and positions, so that we have an idea of who is who, even if an unexpected player comes on the field. If we can and we have the resources, we can include some more information about each one of the players. And a prediction of the following. First of all, starting 11 against us. Then, the strategic plan from the opposition for the game against us. And here we would have the most relevant scenarios of the game, a description of the structures and main patterns, including the collective and the individual information, and also mentioning specifically how those behaviors can be a threat or an opportunity for our own team. Also, the evolution across the game and the management of the turning points, how the team is evolving during the game, taking into consideration what we described about the main scenarios of the game, including conditioning and psychological considerations. Also, the management of the game from the coach side. We could also include the same analysis of the rest of the scenarios of the game. Optional, detailed individual analysis of each player and also of the coach. And finally, we can add some general information such as the field in which we're going to play, the dimensions, the conditions that normally we're going to find in this field, the atmosphere that we are going to live in there, because some things which are not directly connected to football are going to have a big impact many times. So if we know some general information about this club, obviously we're going to include it if it's going to be relevant. We can also have an analysis about the refs, and if we can spend some resources on that and find out a bit more of information about the ref, and also the weather forecast, which can have an impact in our game. In summary, we have seen the nuances of this sort of analysis about our next opposition, mainly that our goal is going to be finding the key aspects that will allow us to compete the best way possible in that game. We have also seen how important it is to select the games that we are going to analyze, the different levels of depth that our analysis can have depending on the requirements from the head coach, the steps that we can follow to go from a general understanding of a team to a level in which we identify those key aspects towards our game against this team. And finally, we have seen a proposal of structure for the final report. In addition, and as a complement for this session of the course, I have included samples of reports that I did some time ago. This is a general description of Napoli for my course as an expert on football analysis. This one is interesting because it shows how to integrate a written explanation with videos. The threats coming from this team are highlighted in red, whereas their weaknesses by a green symbol. Since I do not own the copyright of these videos, they belong to Instat Scout, I haven't included the specific videos. But the idea is that a short video clip would back up with images those tactical conclusions. Finally, this is an example of our report with a very tight deadline. It is about the next opposition of the under 18 Madrid representative squad, and this is a good example of how the priority sometimes needs to be just identifying the key aspects of the opposition without further time to put it down in a more informative manner. In our next session, we will talk about a specific manner to analyze how a team is pressing. So if we are analyzing our next opposition and we are analyzing the way they are building up, it's going to depend a lot how the opposition is pressing high. That is what we are going to go over in the next session of the course.